When did loading in video games go from this to this? And what was the first game to try this out? Who was the first developer to say, we don't want the player to see any loading screens? We don't want the player to be reminded that there's something behind the scenes booting up, pausing that connection between you and your on-screen counterpart. And how does this change your experience? Become immersed in the open world. You can travel as far as you can see. These are phrases you hear constantly with every new release that has a massive environment. But one developer said it all the way back in 1998, and that developer was Naughty Dog. While most of the company was working on Crash Team Racing, co-founders Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin were getting exhausted with the Crash series and set aside some team members to work on a new engine for something then called Project Y. The main principle of the new engine design was this: what if you could see all of the other areas or levels of the game and simply move between them without interrupting gameplay? A seamless move without any strict separation between two areas, and certainly no load times. As you've already guessed from the nostalgic waves at Sentinel Beach, Project Y would eventually become Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. This was the first ever console game to have a single, unbroken 3D world. Something we simply expect when playing a modern AAA game. But this was a technical masterpiece when released on the PS2 back in 2001. A perfect exploration platforming environment for a collectathon game. This style obviously existed already with things like Super Mario 64 and Spyro, but never with such uninterrupted freedom. Sandover Village, Rock Village, Volcanic Crater, Snowy Mountain, the Citadel. You kind of forget that your character never once left your sight in any of these areas. Development was described as trying to build a ship in a bottle. Things like the realistic day and night cycle, triggering background loading, key story features being visible from separate regions. Anything that could shatter the illusion of a real-time world had to be fixed. They had created an engine that was finally able to keep up with the player, efficiently increasing polygons with decreasing distance in a way we had never seen before. The game has loading triggers placed everywhere for Jak to activate, and this decides where all of those polygons go. Take the starting area of the game, for example. Let's say you walk from Sentinel Beach all the way over to the Forbidden Jungle. A loading trigger is placed right here before the Forbidden Jungle. Since you can no longer see Sentinel Beach when you enter, its highly detailed features are reduced and memory is freed up to be used for your current location. When you climb high enough to see back towards the beach, the landscape is still there. It hasn't completely disappeared or challenged the fact that you just walked from there. What's really clever about this is that the developers let nothing go to waste. Back half of these features don't load up at all. Only the sides you can see from a distance, and just enough to keep the open world held together. Now you're probably thinking, so what? What's so exciting about draw distance and a game loading up assets when you get closer? That's what games do. What's exciting is that this goes on for the entire game. Lost Precursor City, Boggy Swamp, Spider Cave, there isn't a single loading screen before any of these areas. You can go from Sandover Village right up to the Citadel, the very last area of the game, without stopping once. That is what makes this game so different than anything that came before it, and a true first for a console. The first time you travel from one main hub to another is when you ride the zoomer through Fire Canyon to reach Rock Village. The only way for Jak to reach the canyon is to head up through this pathway. If we look at it from above, we can see it hasn't loaded at all, because there's no need to yet. However, the space it occupies is still there and part of the map, waiting for us to show up. Just like before, this pathway holds some loading triggers with no other way around. Once Jak passes through, Fire Canyon begins to load up and is fully ready by the time we get there. If we turn around at this point, we can see the windmill from the HUD and any trees tall enough, as you'd expect since we just came from there, when actually the area below it is no longer needed and no longer exists. It will load right back up if we walk towards it again, but for now all of the focus goes on the canyon and soon Rock Village will begin loading up too. At no point during this sequence do we get any impression of a disconnected world. As far as we know, we've truly travelled a long distance from one village to the next without going through a single doorway, portal, or forcefully slowed down narrow passage. We haven't been hindered from playing the game at all. It's the complete opposite. This section between hubs has been a fast-paced, story-driven sequence which gave our Power Cell collection a purpose. We haven't been told to stop and wait at all. There's no trick like being warped somewhere else entirely during loading, because the entire world was built as is and made to fit a realistic space. If there's a cave in a mountain on the other side of the map, that cave genuinely fits inside that mountain. If you go high enough, you can see these boundaries are waiting for you all over the world map, ready to give you a seamless playthrough with no downtime. Setting the loading trigger in a pathway like this before reaching an area was a common method of separating what to keep in focus. But that wasn't the only way. Certain areas will use elevators to give the game some preparation time, while still providing a necessary sense of distance travelled, since you do actually move locations. The Lost Precursor City is a large underwater section that requires an 11-second elevator ride down into the ocean. These 11 seconds are all that's needed to keep you immersed while letting the game get ready, sinking into the vast depths with glimpses of an ancient structure coming into view, to arrive surrounded by ocean life and underwater echoes. Now imagine that journey was skipped over with a quick 5-second load up, cutting to black with Jak popping back up on screen in a place you never actually travelled to. Moments like this are what make the Precursor Legacy. Moments like taking the fisherman's boat over to Misty Island or riding the gondola up to Snowy Mountain. These transitions never let the protagonist out of your sight, but sneakily keep the destination out of view until it's completely ready. The effort put into keeping everything in motion is everywhere, and Naughty Dog held up their vision all the way through since beginning Project Y. One trick, which I've rarely seen to be honest, was if your PS2 was running slow, or if you somehow managed to speed over to an area that needed an extra second to get the environment's finer details ready, Jak would just fall flat on his face. They just made him trip up. There was no way they were admitting defeat and letting you see the game load up. When a game gives you a wide open space like this, we just can't resist asking ourselves, what would happen if I just keep going? What happens if I just keep swimming outwards? Will my character get forcefully turned around? Will I die or hit an imaginary wall before warping back to shore? None of those solutions feel right when the golden rule so far has been to never interrupt your gameplay or hinder your ability to explore freely. If you do wander too far, you will be pursued by the terrifying guardian of external water boundaries, the lurker shark. This thing gave me a heart attack whenever I fell into the water and just made me extra afraid of the water in general. Just listen to the sound it makes when it's coming for you. Sometimes enemies just stick with you and freak you out as a kid, like this snowman in Spyro 3. Look at him, he's enjoying this way too much. Progression in the Precursor Legacy is achieved through exploring and collecting power cells.
All I would need is 20 power cells to give it enough energy to withstand the canyon's heat.
Which itself isn't anything new, but the beauty lies in how you come across them. You're not heading through a clearly labelled portal or some sort of stop and prepare for your mission sequence. You're simply wandering around. You're trying to see what's across the other side of the village or up a cliff, or talking to locals scattered around. And the cutscenes with NPCs begin and end so smoothly, you don't even feel a disconnect from gameplay. NPCs will promise you a power cell if you do certain jobs for them, or they'll just flat out trade for you with precursor orbs. Platforming, boss battles, fishing, zoomer chases, challenges and time trials, gunning down swamp rats, riding the Flut, finding fly scouts, reaching new hubs. Just head in any direction and you'll find all of these ways to collect more power cells and move forward. All of these level designs are laid out so carefully that you can roam from one to the next without jarring visual popping or forcefully stalled gameplay. Each one can transition in and out of memory as needed and would never have been accepted into the final game otherwise, as the standard was kept so high. The team was able to create this insane design because of Goal, a programming language they developed themselves. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I have any in-depth knowledge of programming, but I'd say 500,000 lines of source code is a fair bit of work. Basically, different sets of code could be suspended or executed without freezing or restarting the game. While this revolutionary language allowed Jak and Daxter's world to exist, it did lead to a development bottleneck since it was created by a single person, Andy Gavin, meaning every optimization had to go through him during the early stages, making it a seriously painful process for the rest of the team. It was clearly worth it though, since even today the Jak and Daxter community is full of love for the series. So much so that it led to the creation of OpenGoal in 2020, a project dedicated to bringing native ports of the games to PC through recreating the Goal language without the use of emulation. At this stage, Jak 1 and 2 are currently playable via OpenGoal, with Jak 3 still being worked on. But creating a playable port wasn't the only objective here, since the language was being recreated. Modders have made tons of cool features and changes, and even whole new playable levels. That's the kind of legacy Jak and Daxter has left behind. 25 years later, people still want to roll around collecting power cells somewhere new. And while you may think those few seconds of a loading screen can't really have that much of an impact on your experience, I'd have to disagree. The unbroken connection between you and your on-screen avatar, your constant attachment to the story, the world, the characters, the seamless flow through every hour of gameplay. That feeling that these two never went anywhere without you. You never feel cheated out of a moment with an off-screen journey or skipped over progression. Only you can decide how that journey happens. That is why those few seconds matter.